There's a city in the clouds where the richest people in the world keep glass bubbles over their heads. They wear them so they never have to breathe the same air as you or me. Think about what that takes. You have to look at another human being, decide their breath is filth, and design your entire existence around never sharing it. Now walk a few feet down the street from one of those mansions. There's a person there too. They're branded. There's a collar around their neck that explodes if they run, and the people in the bubbles step over them on a moving walkway that those same slaves are powering with their own bodies. This is Mary Geoise, the Holy Land, and it is, without exaggeration, the most perfectly engineered hell Oda has ever drawn. For 20 plus years, we treated Mary Geoise as evil in the abstract. But over the last few years of chapters, Oda has been showing us exactly what living there does to people. Kuma, Hancock, Ginny, names that turned a symbol into a body count. So today we're starting at the top, in the bubbles, and we're going all the way down to the frozen room underneath the castle. Because the structure of this place isn't an accident. The higher you stand in Mary Geoise, the closer you are to heaven, and the deeper you go, the more you understand it was built on top of a grave. Now, top floor. Start with the masters, because you can't understand the hell until you understand who built it and why they think they deserve it. The celestial dragons call themselves the Tenryubito, the heavenly dragon folk, and their claim to godhood goes back 800 years, to the end of the Void Century, when 20 kings allied together, crushed an ancient kingdom, and founded the world government on the ashes. 19 of those royal families relocated to a single location above the world they'd just conquered. That location is Mary Geoise. Those 19 families are the ancestors of every world noble alive today. But how do you maintain that for 800 years? You can't be gods if anyone's allowed to forget it. Therefore, the bubbles. The air helmets exist so the nobles don't share oxygen with commoners, and the detail that tells you everything about Oda's contempt for these people is that the resin is permeable enough for St. Charles to pick his nose through it. The bubble doesn't actually keep anything out. It was never about hygiene. It's a costume, a way of performing superiority so constantly that even the wearer believes it, and the law backs it completely. A celestial dragon can do anything. They can walk into a market and shoot a stranger for looking at them wrong, and the only consequence is that the stranger's family has to clean it up. If a noble feels threatened, they can summon an admiral, the highest tier of military force in the world, dispatched because a god stubbed their pride. We watched this happen. Sabaody Archipelago, the human auction house. The mermaid Kami is up on the block, and before the auctioneer can even name a starting price, St. Charles just shouts out a bid of 500 million berries for a person, a number bigger than the Straw Hat Crew's bounties combined at that point in the story, thrown out the way you'd order the expensive thing on a menu because you can. Then he shoots Hatchin for the crime of being a fishman in the room, and Luffy crosses the aisle and punches him in the face, and the world holds its breath, because nobody does that. Nobody. That punch is one of the most important moments in the series, and it only lands because of everything we've just laid out. Luffy didn't break a rule. He broke the rule. The one the whole world is organized around. Now here's the part that turns the masters from cartoon villains into something genuinely sinister. Where does the money come from? The mansions? The slaves? The 500 million berry impulse buys? It comes from you. Every nation that joins the world government pays a tribute, the heavenly tribute, scaled to its population, and that tribute is the quiet engine of misery underneath half the backstories in this series. Kuma's home, the Sorbet Kingdom, stripped its own southern citizens of their human rights just to shrink the population they had to pay for. Kaido's old Vodka Kingdom pillaged other countries to make the number. And in one of the most recent gut punches Oda's given us, a kingdom called Esperia couldn't pay, so the government offered them a deal. Hand over 1,000 of your own citizens to serve as slaves in Mary Geoise instead. The king refused and chose war. That's the system. Pay in money or pay in people. And the people end up exactly where we're going next, because for all their power, even the celestial dragons produced one man who looked at all of it and said no. Don Quixote Homing renounced his godhood, walked his family down off the red line, and tried to live as a human being among humans. Oda titled that chapter The Declaration of Humanity. It should have been a redemption story. Instead, the commoners he tried to join burned his house down and tortured his family for years. His wife died, and his 10-year-old son shot him in the head and tried to carry it back up to Mary Geoise to buy his title back. Hold on to that, because it's the first hint of the real horror here. The cruelty of this place doesn't stay at the top. It rolls downhill, and it lands on everyone, and sometimes it turns the victims into the next thing that's wrong with the world. Speaking of which, let's go down a floor. Here's where the tour stops being about wealth and starts being about ownership. Every slave in Mary Geoise wears the same mark, a hoof-shaped brand, sometimes translated as the hoof of the soaring dragon, sometimes as the claw of the celestial dragons. Same symbol either way, a red circle with claws, burned into skin. And the moment that brand goes on you, the official position of the world is that you are no longer a person. You're an item, a possession, property with a logo. We have the perfect witness for this, and it's someone you'd never expect to be a former slave, because she carries herself like the most untouchable woman alive. Boa Hancock, the pirate empress, the most beautiful woman in the world, who treats kings like dirt and faces down admirals without blinking. And underneath all of that armor is a 12-year-old girl who was taken from Amazon Lily with her 2 sisters, sold to the world nobles, and branded on the back. For 4 years, Hancock, Sandersonia, and Marigold belonged to the gods of Mary Geoise. They were fed devil fruits for their owners' entertainment. They were tortured, and the brand on their backs marked them as objects for as long as they lived. So why does the most powerful woman in the world hide behind a lie about a Gorgon curse? Because when she finally got free, she would rather the world believe she has a monster's eyes on her back than let anyone see the truth. She told Luffy she'd rather die than have people learn she was a slave. Sit with that. Death is the preferable option. That's what the brand does. It doesn't just mark the skin, it poisons the way you're allowed to exist afterward. And how did she get free at all? Not the Marines, not justice, a pirate. Fisher Tiger raided Mary Geoise, tore through the Holy Land, and freed every slave he could reach without asking what species they were or where they came from. Hancock walked out in that liberation, and afterward, Fisher Tiger did something that tells you everything about this world. He took the hoof brand on his own sun pirates and redesigned it into a sun, because the brand is a tracking mark, and the Marines hunt escapees down to drag them back. He made his crew unreadable, so no one could ever tell which of them used to be owned and which were always free. Now here is the hypocrisy that should make your jaw tighten. The world government officially abolished slavery over 200 years ago. It's illegal. On paper, it does not exist, and the single place where it is most openly, most thoroughly practiced is the Holy Land itself, the seat of the very government that banned it. The moving walkways are powered by slaves. The mansions are staffed by slaves. The auction at Sabayodi runs because the government looks the other way. The law against slavery isn't a law, it's a press release. So when you put the bubbles and the brand on the same street, you finally see the shape of the place. Up top, people so precious they won't breathe your air. A few feet down, people so disposable, their furniture. And the genius of Oda's design is that there's no wall between them. There's just an elevation change. We've met the masters, we've met the marked, but we haven't met the man who was born already wearing the brand, who never got a single day of freedom to lose. And his story is where Mary Geoise stops being a place and becomes the saddest thing in One Piece. Remember the frozen room at the bottom of this tour? We're getting there. But first, the slave who tried to become a hero and got turned into a weapon instead. When Bonnie drives a blade into one of the 5 elders on Egghead, screaming that he murdered her father, the elder Saturn doesn't flinch. He just looks at her and says it plainly. Kuma was born a slave, the last survivor of the Buccaneers, a race that committed a grave sin against the world long ago. And that one line cracks open the most devastating flashback Oda has drawn in well over a decade. Here's the engine of it. Kuma never had a fall from grace, because he was never above the ground to begin with. He was born in the Sorbet Kingdom to a buccaneer father, a race carrying giant's blood, taller and stronger than humans, hunted nearly to extinction alongside the Lunarians and the Three-Eye tribe for some ancient crime the world won't even explain. The doctor who delivered him sold the family out to the world government, so before Kuma could walk, he was property of the celestial dragons. And his father, Clap, did the one thing a parent in that situation can still do. He tried to keep his son's spirit alive. He told him the legend of the sun god Nika, the warrior who freed the oppressed and made them laugh even in chains. He danced the rhythm of liberation to cheer his boy up, and a celestial dragon shot him dead for being too loud. Blood on a child's face. A father killed mid-dance for the crime of making his enslaved son smile. That's the moment that should be playing in your head every single time the story shows you one of these gods in their bubble. That's what the bubble is protecting them from having to feel. But Kuma doesn't break the way they want him to. as a 9-year-old slave, hauled to the God Valley hunting event where nobles pay to hunt human beings for sport. He stands in front of the elder Saturn himself and refuses the world's logic. He says no one is born a slave. He says he's going to be like Nika and save people. And Saturn, looking at this child, decides right there that the Buccaneers have to be wiped out, precisely because they produce people who still believe that. And then Kuma does it. At God Valley, alongside a young Ginny and a young Ivankov, he gets his hands on the pawpaw fruit and teleports people out of the slaughter. Over 500 lives saved in the chaos, including, in one of Oda's nastier little ironies, a young Marshal D. Teach. The boy slave becomes the thing he promised to become. He saves people. So how does a man like that end up as a silent, will-less war machine? Love. The cruelest possible version of it. Years later, Kuma is raising a daughter, Bonnie, who is dying of an incurable disease, and the only person in the world who might cure her is Vegapunk. Vegapunk makes a deal. He'll treat Bonnie if he can use Kuma's rare buccaneer body as the template for a clone army, the Pacifista, named with horrible gentleness after Kuma calling himself a pacifist. But Saturn is listening, and Saturn adds conditions because the world government never takes a deal without twisting it into a leash. Kuma has to become a warlord, Kuma has to become a cyborg, and Kuma has to have his memories, his personality, his free will, everything that makes him him, erased completely so he can be controlled. A self-destruct device gets installed in his body for good measure. Before they switch him off, Kuma asks for two things. He asks Vegapunk to program his hollowed-out shell to guard the Straw Hat's ship until one of them comes back. And he asks Vegapunk to tell Bonnie happy 10th birthday, because he already knows he won't be able to say it himself. Vegapunk, sobbing, tells him he's a hero and pulls the switch that empties him out. And here's the part that ties the arc back to that 9-year-old who refused to be a slave. On Egghead, with his mind erased and a literal shutdown command running through him, something in Kuma wakes up anyway. He runs across a battlefield he's not supposed to be able to comprehend, takes a blow meant for his daughter, and punches the elder who engineered all of it. Vegapunk, watching, can't explain it scientifically. He just calls it the power of love. The slave they tried to turn into a weapon turned out to have one thing left in him that Mary Geoise could never brand, erase, or own. Remember that, because it's the point of this place, and the reason it's doomed. But we're not done with the cruelty yet, because the disease that started this entire chain, the one killing Bonnie, the one that forced Kuma into Vegapunk's lab in the first place, that came from Mary Geoise too. And it came through the woman Kuma loved. If Kuma is the story of a man who was never free, Ginny is the story of how Mary Geoise takes someone who got out and reaches back down to destroy her anyway. Ginny grows up beside Kuma in Sorbet. She escapes God Valley with him as a kid. She joins the fight against the government alongside him, becomes a commander in the Revolutionary Army, the East Army commander, a leader in the war against everything Mary Geoise stands for. She loves Kuma her whole life. She even proposes to him, and he turns her down, not because he doesn't love her, because he watched what happened to his own mother, who was enslaved for the crime of marrying a buccaneer, and he cannot stand the thought of that fate touching Ginny. So he protects her by keeping his distance, which is its own quiet tragedy. A man so shaped by this world's cruelty that he won't even let himself be happy in case it gets her killed. And then the thing he was afraid of happens anyway, in a form worse than he imagined. A celestial dragon abducts Ginny, and I want to be careful here, because the fandom runs ahead of the page on this one. The manga has not named which world noble took her. What we know is that she's taken to Mary Geoise to become this noble's 8th wife, a number, the 8th, as though the previous 7 were furniture that wore out. And during her time up there, the elder Saturn performs a chemical experiment on her. It fails, and that failure gives Ginny an incurable disease the story calls the sapphire scales. Blue, gem-like scales that spread across the body and harden under natural light, not just sunlight, moonlight too. The disease turns the very thing that should be beautiful, light itself, into the thing that's killing you. So what does Mary Geoise do with a woman who's no longer useful? They throw her out. Discarding her is what accidentally frees her, and she leaves carrying a daughter, Bonnie, conceived without any say of her own. And Saturn experiments on the infant too, passing the same sapphire scales down to the child. Dying, Ginny does the only thing she has strength left for. She points a boat toward home. She calls the Revolutionary Army one last time to say she loves Kuma, and Kuma, the man with a fruit that lets him cross any distance instantly, teleports to her side, and he arrives too late. She's already gone, killed by exposure to the natural light she could no longer survive, and there's a baby left behind. This is the chapter a lot of people will tell you is the single darkest Oda has ever written, and it earned that. Because look at what Mary Geoise actually did here. It didn't just kill a woman, it took her, used her, diseased her, discarded her, poisoned her child with the same illness, and that illness is the exact thing that later forces Kuma to sell his own mind to Vegapunk to save the daughter. Every thread of this tragedy traces back up the red line to the same address. One place engineered all of it, and it did it without a single one of its gods ever feeling a thing, because that's what the bubble is for. So now you understand the tour, the masters who won't breathe your air, the slaves branded as property, the man born owned, and the woman destroyed for getting out. And it all sits on top of one final room, the one I keep telling you to remember. Let's go all the way down. So now, descend the last level. Underneath all of it, in a freezing chamber deep beneath the castle, a straw hat, an enormous one, far too big for any normal person. And right after Doflamingo first mentioned a national treasure hidden in Mary Geoise, powerful enough to shake the world, Oda showed us Imu personally descending to look at this frozen hat. There are two straw hats in this story now. One is locked in ice, in the dark, at the bottom of the holiest place in the world, hidden by the people who rule everything. The other one is out in the open air, sitting on the head of a laughing idiot from the East Blue, passed down from Roger to Shanks to Luffy, out in the sun, in motion, free. This is why Imu fears the D. It's why the government erased the Void Century, annihilated Ohara for studying it, and hunted Kuma's buccaneers nearly out of existence. Mary Geoise wasn't built to rule the world. It was built to keep one specific thing frozen, and the moment a man eats a fruit that turns out to be the sun god Nika, the warrior who frees slaves and makes them dance, the thing in the freezer starts to thaw. So here's where I'll leave you. Next time the story shows you a celestial dragon in a bubble, don't just see a villain. See a person so afraid of one frozen hat in a basement that they've spent 800 years refusing to breathe the same air as the people who might go dig it out. As always, thank you for watching and have a nice one.